praise team. Oh, excuse me, sorry. Damn. That's really loud. Can you turn it down? I think it's just my microphone. There we go. That's much better. All right. Thank you, praise team, so much for leading us into just a wonderful spirit of worship. I want to open up today just with a quick question. Have you guys ever been around fake people? Like, not just necessarily people that, like to portray a right image, right? They like to portray this image of they got their life all together, and, there are people, maybe you're a parent, you're around those kinds of parents that, just make you want to just squeeze something, really, really tight. You're like, man, my kids are great, but you're talking up your kids so much, and you're pretending that your life is so much better than mine. It just infuriates you. Well, I can relate. I can see that in my own life in just different situations with people where they talk about different things and they're just so fake, and it just kills me inside to just be able to want to call them out. But that being said, I have to take a second to take a step back and look at my own life and see that I'm not fake as well, because it's very easy in our world today. Just by show of hands, how many of you guys are on Instagram today? I'm just curious. So 4 of us? Okay. So 4 of us, that's actually not that bad. Most people on Instagram can take pictures of these wonderful, delicious looking meals, and can take pictures of themselves, selfies, duck faces and all that wonderful stuff. And they like to portray a certain image of just this life that they have formed around them and shaped around them. And it's so easy for it all just to be a facade. It can just be an upfront, totally superficial, that's it. They have this one thing, this one post, this one outlet of social media, and that's all you know about them. Because if if you were to see the inside of their life, you were to see behind the face and beside the fakeness, you wouldn't necessarily like what you see. Well, today, we're here to kind of talk about what it means to be real, and what real faith looks like, and what we're called to. This series that we're going to be doing is called Get Wise. And I'm not saying that anyone in this room is dumb. I'm not saying that any of us are not wise. I recognize I'm only 23 years old, and I've still got a lot of wisdom that I need to learn from you guys. But with faith, we are always growing, right? We're always in a process. We're always on a journey to grow more in our faith. And so, one of my favorite books of the Bible, I'll just be honest with you, it's one of my favorites. It's the book of James. I love the book of James. It's so just matter of fact, straight to the facts, but at the same time, it's so just straight to the point of what faith is supposed to look like. Now, James, for a little bit of context, James is the brother of Jesus himself. So he grew up knowing full well who Jesus was, and yet he still has such a wonderful perspective of what faith is supposed to look like. And so, despite the fact that Jesus was his brother, James has a lot to say. And we're going to be talking about this for a few more weeks after this, but I'm just going to go give you kind of an outline of how I see the book of James broken down. The first step that we're going to talk about today is what I'm describing Unshakable Joy. And next week, we're going to be talking about faith and works. We're going to be talking about doing things in faith that we are required to do. We're also going to be talking about purity through unity. We're going to be talking about taming the tongue. We're also going to be talking about destructive favoritism. Those are lots of the things that it points out in the book of James, but especially today, we're here to talk about real faith. We're here to talk about being authentic. And so today we are going to get to a lot of things, and there's going to be a lot of information. So you have to forgive me. It's going to feel a little bit of an uphill battle, I guess, more or less, just with understanding. But if you just trust me through the process, we'll get there, and it'll be good this morning. Thank you. Yeah, so going back to the fakeness, being fake is easy, right? But being real with yourself and being real with God sometimes can be very, very hard. Oftentimes, we are so afraid of our emotions that we can't vocalize them, that we're just afraid that there's going to be judgment from God or from others. And so we like to just pretend that everything's okay. It's so easy. Even for me, I'll confess to this. It's easy for me to go through, even on a Sunday morning, just say, hey, how you doing? I'm good, thanks. And that will be the extent of my conversation. Now, I'm an introvert, and so I have to be sure to intentionally push myself out. into relating to others, but other people sometimes, we have to be comfortable with realizing that it's okay to not be okay. It's okay if things in your life are going not so well. It's okay that things are happening, because the truth is that trials happen. Kylie and I, we just finished this wonderful series on Job about life is good, right? And here we are, and we're moving forward, but James, in his book, he opens up with trials. He opens up with these burdens that we all have to face. And so, trials happen. All believers experience it, and trials, hardships, all these things happen for a reason. It's not just a matter of if we suffer, it's a matter of when. And so there are lots of times in the Bible we realize that even the best people in the Bible, the most wonderful and most righteously proclaimed people in the Bible, they all had different hardships. They all had different sufferings that they had to go through. For the Old Testament, I think especially of Joseph and his whole story. He was not this awful person. I mean, he was a little bit of a brat if you read through the book of Genesis, but he wasn't this person that deserved all the things that happened to him. You know, his brothers were so hateful toward him. They ruined his life. They sold him into slavery. And here he is. He's in Egypt, and things start to look up just a little bit for him. And he gets humbled once again, all the way back down to the bottom floor of going to prison then and rotting in there with other people. And he sees people go in and out of prison, and he's like, did they just forget about me? And so Joseph finally, he gets through all those sufferings, and he's exalted to a place where he is second in command in all of Egypt, and that's wonderful. Another example, though, we think about the Israelites in Egypt following Joseph. Again, they were not deserving of slavery. They were not deserving of the things and the treatments that the Egyptians gave them, but they were enslaved. They were in bondage, and so finally, God comes through, and he releases them through Moses and all the different miracles that take place, and that's a wonderful story. With Job, he was this incredible man of faith. He was credited as being righteous in all the things that he did. He was a man of God. And yet, here is this great calamity that destroys all his property, destroys his family, tears him apart, literally to the point where, again, he has those sores on his body, and he is just begging for God to show up. And it takes weeks, it seems like, hardly, with those conversations between him and his friends. It feels like it's weeks of he's just having to suffer, and he's having to ask God, and ask his friends, why is this happening? What did I do to deserve this? In the New Testament, even Jesus himself, and this will be on the screen, but even Jesus himself says that there will be hardships, there will be trials. John 16:33 tells us to take heart. Though we will have trouble, he has overcome the world. Paul himself, this won't be on the screen, but he talks about how he has his own sufferings. He has these own things that he has to go through. This joint suffering. In the book of Romans, Paul writes that these things that happen, they happen so that we can suffer with God, but because we suffer with God and with Christ, we can also be glorified with Christ. Peter himself, one of the main disciples, he himself went through all sorts of persecution and trials, eventually to the point he was crucified himself. But of course, for those of you that aren't familiar, he actually requested that he would be crucified upside down because he didn't deserve to be crucified the same way as Jesus Christ. All those people in the Bible, all the people that we read about and learn from their stories and what they write, they all had hardships. They all had barriers. They all had reasons that they should not have been people of faith. And so my question is, and I think the question that James eventually answers through his writings, what is it about faith that elevates someone from where they're suffering in this really low place to a place where they can be exalted and be hopeful? What is that? What is the difference between right here and right here? Is it something that you do? Is it something that you say? I think oftentimes we think to be a person of faith means you have to go to church. You have to do all the right things, right? You have to read your Bible. You have to maybe document it on Instagram. You have to take a picture, make sure you're talking with someone about all these wonderful prayer things that are going on in your life. But no, it's not about what we do. You see, sometimes when we get into this place where we think it's about religion, and the thing that I was just going through, I'll be honest with you, this is one of those weeks where I had written this sermon, I had it in the back of my mind, it was gone, whatever. Literally on Thursday morning, bright and early, probably about 5:30, I just woke up. I just randomly woke up, and I felt God speaking to me to tell me that, I was, number one, not writing it the right way to communicate His truth, but also the conclusions that I was making were not accurate with what James was really trying to write. And so what I came to, the conclusion was that it's not about religion. It's not about what you do. It's not about what you say or what you think. It's about who you are. And who you are, what that comes from, where that comes from, is the value that God has placed on each and every one of us. Now, if you're like me, I look in the mirror sometimes and I see myself as a young kid. I realize I'm inexperienced. I realize that I'm not always the best person to talk to. I'm not always the best person that I can be, right? And yet, here's God, and He's saying, you know what? I've called you. I've equipped you. I have made you exactly as you are supposed to be. Now, again, if you're like me, you probably go through these phases in life where these kind of emotional roller coasters, right? And sometimes you're at the top of the world. Other times, not so great, right? You feel like you're just under the gun. And here we are, and we have these trials. We have things that happen in our life. We have sickness. We have work things that we have to do. We have family matters that we have to take care of. And those are fair concerns. And again, through the book of James, we are going to get to what it looks like for us to do things in faith. But again, today we have to focus on who we are and what it means to be in faith. What it looks like to be a part of Christ's family. And so, going back to even the book of Job, if you think about suffering and trials, if you think about outside, external hindrances to faith, it's kind of like a furnace. Job himself in Job 23:10, he says that once I've gone through the furnace, I will come out like gold. He says, I've gone through all these hardships, I've gone through all these things that should point me away from faith, but because I'm holding true, because I'm holding on to who God has called me to be, I know that I'm going to come out the other side and I'm going to be better for it. You see, when we are holding on to our faith, these obstacles, these things that would hinder us from communion and from community with God and with others, they actually become an opportunity. What should have been an obstacle becomes an opportunity. James 1:12 even, he says, he talks about how with trials, all these things, they happen so that we would be blessed. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him. Now, again, I don't know if you're like me, but I just continue to see all the things on the news. I continue to see all the things that are just tearing our country apart. My own friends, even just from high school and college too, where they're just so different and they're not willing to listen to each other. And it's just animosity toward each other almost. I mean, they just don't want to have anything to do with each other. And here I am, and I'm a pastor. I'm supposed to be a person mediating, and I just don't want to be a part of it sometimes, right? We just want to be hands off. And I'm sure you guys can relate. It's a sticky, messy situation pretty much all around us. But here we are, and we're called to go through trials. We're called to be a voice of truth. We're called to be uplifting. We're called to be peacemakers. But that's hard, right? That's really hard. And so, looking back at the Old Testament, Joseph's position was as a second only to the Pharaoh. The Israelites were freed from slavery. Job, again, his wealth, his family, all those things were restored back to him. But it's not always as expected. You see, in the Old Testament, we kind of see the fulfillment of those hardships. We see them come out on the other side like gold. Whereas in the New Testament, we see suffering. We see these things that happen. And the book of Hebrews even tells us that people did not receive what they were promised. And yet, they're in the book of fame, the hall of fame almost, for faith. Jesus' resurrection, again, Jesus had to die. Now granted, we are not always going to see these incredible miracles happen, but Jesus, he suffered, he died, and he got to be resurrected. But then Paul, he was able to communicate with all these churches and all that. He was able to go through his life and yet he still suffered. He was under constant persecution, always having to run away from the law. He was a person that knew what it was like to be under trial. And yet, he was put to death. And Peter, again, his obedience to speak up against the Hebrew leaders at that time, it drove him to a place where he was eventually crucified. And while it's easy to look at those people and to think, well, that's just Bible time. We don't have to go through life and feel hardships. We don't have to go through life and be afraid of our faith. I would disagree with you. I look around and I see that people of faith are needed. I think a lot of people are looking to us, to churches, not just Lyman Wesley, but other churches in general, to be a voice of reason, to be a voice of truth and love. And I'll be honest, sometimes I'm concerned that we are not being those people. I'm concerned that there are not enough churches in this area, even specifically, that are just stepping up to say the truth, to speak the truth. And that's not to say that we're not speaking truth in here. It's just that the truth too often stays inside of us. Because again, we're tempted, because we're not perfect, we're tempted because we're not in a position of high position, that we don't have a place, we don't have a voice to add anything to the conversations. And that's just not true. You see, it's not going to matter what we do. It's not going to matter what we say. If we're coming to a conversation, if we're coming into hardships and we're thinking, you know what, I need to be in a position where I am talking to all these people and they're not listening to me, that's okay. It's okay that you're not going to be listened to. It's okay that you're going to be persecuted. It's okay that people are not going to agree with you. It's also okay not, to be offended. But we have to be able to speak up. We have to be able to, drive something up from the core of who we are to say, you know what, enough is enough. I'm not going to sit back in the silence. I'm not going to be tired. I'm not going to be lazy. I'm not going to feel like I'm unprepared, because I know that God has called me. And so, again, we have to realize that we are never suffering alone. We're never suffering alone. God is full of compassion and mercy, and he knows what it is to suffer. Jumping with me in James 5 even, he writes in verses 3 through 12, he says, look, your gold and silver are corroded, their corrosion, in James 5, 7 through 11, Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and spring rains. And you too, be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against one another, brothers and sisters, or you will be judged. The judge is standing at the door. But brothers and sisters, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. And you have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. And again, the Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Now it's easy, again, to look at our lives and see, maybe I don't have all the things that our world's telling us we're supposed to have. Maybe I don't always say the things I'm supposed to say. Maybe I don't always look the way I'm supposed to look. But that's okay. The faith in general is so countercultural. It's turning our world upside down. And our world doesn't like that. Naturally, they don't agree. We're living in a world where profits are what we want, where we're looking for the maximum potential of everything in every scenario. But sometimes that's okay to not have those things. Read with me in Jesus' words, even in Matthew 5, and what he says in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now, I can't read that and not be uplifted. I can't read that and not be encouraged to see the truth that no matter what this world's going to throw at me, no matter what, sickness, no matter what external forces are going to be working against me, I'm in a position where I can know it's not what I do, it's not who I've made my life to look like. It's who I am that God loves. It's who I am that God created me to be that has value. All these things, God has placed infinite worth on me and on you. Look in the mirror. Do you see someone that Christ died for? The truth is, you are. Again, evangelism and outreach is great, but sometimes we have to be reminded, Christ died for me. That's a part of my identity. We can't experience that. We can't come to that knowledge and ever be the same. It has to be something that goes on well beyond that first time. It has to go into every single day. Every day you get up, every time you make your bed, tie your shoes, whatever. God loves me. God died for me because he thought I was worth it. And so, in closing, we are an extension of God's message. We are the gospel sometimes. You may be the only gospel that anyone's going to interact with this week. You may be the only part of Jesus that anyone will ever experience this entire week. Maybe even this month, maybe even the whole year. You might be the only person that they are going to be around and have experiences with and interaction with to represent Christ. That's just the kind of world we live in today. And so, look at your own life. Look at what you are doing, but also just look at who you are. Is your life really a life of faith? Are you taking time to be in the Bible? Are you taking time to just reflect on everything you're going through in your life, what you've gone through? Maybe look back in the past. Most people would probably recommend that you don't just dwell on the past, but it's okay to look back. There are lessons to be learned from the past. There are lessons to be learned from looking at your history and seeing what has tripped you up before. Maybe looking at what has hindered you in relationships before. We're called to be more, we're called to say more, to speak truth and life into people, that they would be encouraged and come away blessed, right? That's our calling. And the only way that happens is if we realize that it's not about, again, what we do, but it's who we are and who God is and what he has done for us and in us and through us.